My name is Sophia Bennett. I'm 59 years old, and on December 22nd, I stood in my kitchen in Madison, Wisconsin, phone pressed to my ear, while my brother calmly explained that Christmas Eve at the family house had become something of a high-level networking night and that my presence would probably make everyone uncomfortable. He said it gently, almost professionally, like he was canceling a meeting, not cutting his own sister out of the family. I remember staring at a framed photo on my counter while he spoke. In it, I was younger, laughing, flower on my cheek, everyone crowded around me like I still belonged at the center of that picture. By the time the call ended, I no longer felt like a person in that frame. I felt like something someone had quietly edited out. I didn't cry, I didn't beg, I just said, I understand, and I did understand, far more than he realized. He thought he was pushing aside an older sister who no longer mattered. What he didn't know was that I had spent 25 years building the very company he was now using as his stage, and I had finally stopped confusing blood with loyalty. I spent Christmas Eve alone in my apartment. Then, just after midnight, my parents called, voices shaking, asking me what was on the news. But before I tell you why, let me take you back to where this really started. People always assume betrayal begins with one dramatic moment, one lie, one signature, one blow-up at the dinner table. It doesn't. It starts the way family betrayals almost always start, small enough to dismiss, repeated long enough to feel normal. I founded Fingered 25 years earlier with two other risk analysts, working out of a rented office above a shuttered furniture store on the east side of Madison. We were building fraud detection architecture for mid-size financial institutions long before that phrase sounded glamorous enough for investor podcasts. I wrote the first core detection models myself, lived on gas station coffee, slept under my desk twice a week, and learned very early that when a woman builds something from the ground up, people admire her right up until the moment they can imagine taking it from her. My brother Ryan joined the company much later, after business school, after polished suits, after learning how to smile with all his teeth while saying absolutely nothing of substance. He was 10 years younger than me, charming in rooms where I was direct, easy with people in ways I never particularly cared to be. At first, I was proud of him. I genuinely thought he would strengthen what I had built. Instead, he studied it. He learned which investors responded to confidence more than competence, which board members preferred a clean story over a complicated truth, and which family members could be slowly trained to repeat his version of reality if he fed it to them carefully enough. The first real warning came at a winter cabin weekend in Door County. Ryan called it a family reset, said we all needed time away from phones and city noise. My parents came up from Florida, and for one fragile evening, it almost felt real. Wine by the fire, card games, old stories, the kind of warmth that makes you ignore the splinter sliding into your skin. After dinner, Ryan drifted beside me on the deck while snow blew off the lake. He asked about the compliance engine I had been quietly developing for 2 years. He framed it like admiration. So how are you getting the model to flag layered behavior patterns without drowning analysts in false positives? It was the kind of question only someone paying very close attention would ask. I answered more than I should have, not source code, not enough to replicate it cleanly, but enough to sketch the architecture. And for just half a second, I caught the reflection of his phone screen in the glass door before he slipped it into his pocket. I told myself I was imagining it. Weeks later, I found phrases from that conversation embedded in an internal strategy memo with my brother's name all over it and mine nowhere. Not identical, not enough for a clean accusation, but close enough to make my stomach drop. When I confronted him, he smiled and said we were aligned thinkers. That was his favorite trick. He never denied the theft outright. He dissolved it, turned it into overlap, synergy, shared vision. Then he got to my parents before I could. Suddenly I was hearing that I had become difficult, territorial, unwilling to share. Maybe a little bitter about getting older in a young industry. My mother asked me why I couldn't just be happy that Ryan was good with people. My father said I had always been brilliant but lacked polish. I had built the machine they were now applauding, and somehow the family conversation had become about my tone. What made it worse was that part of me still wanted to believe I was overreacting. That is the particular cruelty of being betrayed by family. Your instincts scream long before your heart will testify. So I started documenting quietly. Email threads, meeting notes, time-stamped development logs, repository snapshots, voice memos after every strange conversation. I met with an intellectual property attorney in Milwaukee under the cover of a compliance conference and spent for straight hours building the paper trail I should have created years earlier. He told me something I still remember word for word. The most dangerous thief is the one who believes access is ownership. I signed every document with shaking hands, not because I doubted Ryan anymore, but because accepting the truth meant accepting what it said about my family. It meant my brother didn't simply want success. He wanted a version of success where I became invisible. Inside my own life. The moment I stopped doubting myself arrived in Chicago in November, though I was never supposed to be there. Ryan told me the annual investor gala was a closed-door event. Routine, nothing strategic. I might have believed him if he hadn't looked so pleased while saying it. That night, I was in my apartment reheating soup I barely wanted when a former colleague texted me a LinkedIn livestream link with one message. "Were you aware of this?" I clicked it. And there he was on a stage under sapphire lighting, the fingered logo spinning behind him, accepting an Industry Innovation Award for a transformational predictive compliance engine that was, unmistakably, based on the system I had built. He did not say my name once. He thanked the board, the advisory team, his wife. He even thanked our parents for teaching him resilience. Then he clicked through slides that made my chest go cold. Not just broad concepts this time. He had my structural language, my flagging hierarchy, my prioritization logic, even a visual metaphor I had used in a private note. Months earlier, comparing hidden financial risk to weather forming below the radar line. I sat frozen on my couch while comments flooded the live stream. Visionary, brilliant, the future of compliance. And then the camera cut to the banquet tables, where my parents were smiling like they had personally engineered him. That was the night something in me hardened, not into rage. Rage burns too hot and too fast. What settled into me was precision. I called my attorney first. Then I called a journalist. I trusted a woman in New York named Tessa Monroe, someone I had met years before on a panel about regulatory ethics and invisible labor in tech. She had the kind of mind that didn't get seduced by charm. I told her I wasn't ready to speak on record yet, but I wanted her to understand what I had. By the end of that call, she had gone very quiet. Then she said, "Sophia, if your documentation is what you say it is, this isn't a family dispute. This is a fraud story wearing a family costume." That sentence changed everything for me. Thanksgiving came. I heard nothing. No invitation, no schedule, no vague excuse, nothing at all. On Thanksgiving morning, I opened social media and found a professionally shot photo carousel of my entire family gathered at my parents' rented lake house in Florida. Matching linen, curated laughter, candles and expensive tableware. Ryan at the center, carving turkey like some benevolent king. My mother had captioned it, "Grateful for the ones who show up for each other." I stared at that sentence for a long time. It's amazing how cruelty becomes most visible when someone decorates it. That same weekend, I made the real decision. I would not only expose what Ryan had done, I would remove the ground beneath the version of reality he was standing on. I called two senior engineers who had quietly left-fingered over the past 3 years, both of whom had complained off the record that leadership kept burying the people doing actual work. One was in Minneapolis, the other in Denver. Both had watched Ryan rise by presenting other people's labor as polished strategy. Both said yes. Before I finished my offer. Within 2 weeks, we had the skeleton of a new company, Ledger North. Not flashy, not sleek, just honest. Built around the engine Ryan had tried to parade as his own breakthrough, except this time it would go to market under the name of the person who had actually built it. People like to imagine revenge as one explosive act, but the most effective revenge is often administrative. Contracts, logs, witnesses, backups, dates. If anger is thunder, documentation is climate. By early December, Tessa had seen enough evidence to begin building her piece under embargo. My attorney had letters ready for the board, for investors, four-fingered outside counsel. I had secured independent validation of my original development timeline from 2 academic specialists and 3 archived test environments. There would be no misunderstanding defense left when this broke. Then Ryan called 3 days before Christmas and told me not to come. He said the house would be full of clients, board contacts, people who might feel awkward given my recent tension with him. Recent tension, as if I were the social problem in a room full of theft. I listened until he finished. Then I asked one question, "Does Mom know you're saying this to me?" He paused a little too long before answering. We all agreed it would be easier. That was the moment I understood something I had resisted for years. Ryan might have started the betrayal, but my parents had chosen the comfort of his version. Sometimes the deepest wound isn't that one person harms you, it's that everyone else finds it more convenient to call the harm complicated. After that call, I sent Tessa a 2-word message. Green light. I authorized my attorney to deliver the investor packets at 11:50 p.m. on Christmas Eve. I scheduled Ledger North's quiet launch for 12:01 a.m. and then I made dinner for 1, sat in my apartment with a glass of red wine I barely tasted, and waited for midnight to tell the truth. Christmas Eve was almost unbearably ordinary until it wasn't. That's what I remember most. The dishwasher humming, snow collecting on the balcony rail. A single candle burning beside the sink because I couldn't stand how empty the apartment looked without some small act of defiance against the dark. Around 9:30, I almost called everything off. Not because Ryan deserved mercy, but because I could see the blast radius too clearly. My parents waking up to headlines, fingered employees who had nothing to do with any of this losing security overnight. my niece hearing adults whisper. When justice arrives, it never knocks only on the guilty door. Then my phone buzzed. A junior analyst still at fingered someone I had mentored years earlier sent me a photo from the Christmas Eve party at my parents' house. Ryan was standing in front of a projection screen, delivering what looked like another investor mini presentation between cocktails, and behind him, in giant blue letters, were the words, "The Future of Financial Trust, Ryan Bennett." My engine, my years, my work, his name. Something inside me became very calm after that. I typed back, "Thank you, delete this message." Then I closed my eyes, breathed once, and let the clock keep moving. At 11:57, Tessa texted that the article was loaded and scheduled. At 11:58, my attorney confirmed the board packet had been delivered digitally and physically. At 11:59, Ledger North's website went live in stealth mode. I stood by the window, watching snow fall between the buildings, thinking about the first winter I had built fingered from a folding table and a borrowed server. Every room where I had been told to smile more, simplify more, step back more, trust more. Every time I had accepted being diminished in order to keep the peace. Midnight came quietly, then my phone detonated. First, a string of email notifications, then text messages, then missed calls stacking so fast the screen blurred. Tessa's article hit exactly at midnight. The headline was brutal in the cleanest possible way. Fingered executive accused of misrepresenting sister's proprietary risk engine as company innovation. The piece contained timeline evidence, internal documents, investor materials, expert validation, and a formal statement from my counsel confirming legal action. It didn't read like gossip, it read like gravity. 1 minute later, Ledger North's launch statement posted publicly with my name attached as founder and lead architect. At 12:06, Ryan called. I let it ring twice before answering. The first thing I heard was noise, voices, breaking glass, footsteps, the unmistakable sound of a room collapsing socially in real time. Then Ryan, breathless and furious. "What did you do?" I looked at my reflection in the black window as I answered. I told the truth. He started shouting immediately. Defamation, malice, family, timing, Christmas. He kept grabbing at every moral word available because facts were no longer on his side. Then I heard my father in the background asking what was happening, and my mother saying my name like it had just become dangerous in her mouth. At 12:11, my father called from his own phone. I answered because I wanted to hear who he was when Ryan was no longer narrating the world for him. His voice was shaking. "Sophia, what's on the news?" There was a lifetime inside that question, not what happened. Not did Ryan do this? Not even are you okay? Just the stunned confusion of people who had mistaken comfort for truth for so long they couldn't recognize reality when it finally walked in uninvited. I told him to read the article fully before saying another word to me. My mother got on the line next, already crying, asking why I would do this tonight of all nights. I said because Ryan thought tonight would protect him. Then I hung up. By 1:00 a.m., Fingered's emergency statement had been released. By 1:20, Ryan had deleted his social media. By 2:00, the board had suspended him pending investigation. I sat on my couch in the dark with my shoes still on and realized no one had asked me the question that actually mattered. How many times had I tried to solve this quietly before I set fire to the lie? The next 72 hours were worse for Ryan than anything I could have invented because public humiliation is one thing, but institutional consequences are another. Fingered's board moved with the speed of people who suddenly understand their own names might be attached to the wreckage. Ryan was placed on immediate administrative leave by Christmas afternoon. The company's largest prospective partnership froze negotiations by the morning after. Within the week, 2 investor groups threatened legal action over misrepresentation during fundraising. Every confident little shortcut he had taken, every way he had reframed my work as his narrative became a breadcrumb trail straight to his own collapse. He tried apology first, in the modern way, a carefully drafted LinkedIn statement about communication breakdowns and shared development environments and deep regret for how certain contributions may have been perceived. It lasted 38 minutes before the backlash forced it down. The second version was written by someone smart enough to know there was no room left for fog. He admitted he had presented work derived from my architecture. He admitted he had excluded me from strategic conversations. He even admitted that family dynamics had shaped professional decisions. What he still wouldn't say was the central truth that he had counted on my silence because I was family, and because women are so often trained to confuse discretion with dignity. Once the story broke, others began speaking. A former product lead described Ryan's habit of borrowing frameworks in meetings and reframing them as executive synthesis. A compliance director detailed how female staff were routinely told to be more collaborative when they challenged attribution. A junior engineer sent Tessa old Slack screenshots where Ryan had referred to me as founder era brilliant, but too emotionally rigid for scale. There is nothing more dangerous to a polished fraud than a microphone handed to patterns. By New Year's week, Ryan was no longer a misunderstood executive under pressure. He was becoming what he had always feared most, a cautionary example. His wife Elise moved out of their Chicago condo with their son after lawyers began calling the house. She later sent me a short message I still think about. "I'm sorry I ever believed the version of you I was given." My parents, who had spent years treating Ryan's ambition like evidence of destiny, found themselves suddenly uninvited from the very circles they had used him to impress. My mother's Christmas photos disappeared from her account. That part shouldn't have mattered to me, but I'd be lying if I said I felt nothing watching the social architecture they had prized more than honesty crack under the weight of actual facts, and yet the story didn't become simple. Fingard announced layoffs in the second week of January, not a total collapse, but enough to turn celebration into ash in my throat. These were not the people who had stolen from me. Many of them had done good work under bad leadership. I spent 2 straight days on calls with my Ledger North co-founders, creating a priority hiring track for displaced Fingard staff in engineering, regulatory analysis, and client infrastructure. We couldn't save everyone, and that haunted me, but we moved fast enough to bring over 11 people within the month, including one single mother in Milwaukee who called me crying after signing her offer letter because she had been sure she was going to lose her home. That was when the real emotional weight arrived, not from Ryan, not from my parents, from the bystanders, the people standing in the spray when the vessel finally shattered. I helped where I could: letters, referrals, introductions, and into cases, quiet bridge payments through a hardship fund we set up without publicity. Some nights, though, I still lay awake wondering whether there had been a version of justice that spared more people. I don't think there was. But uncertainty is part of the price of conscience. Anyone who tells you revenge feels clean has never had one that mattered. Ryan called me again 2 weeks after New Year's. For the first time in his life, he didn't sound strategic. He sounded stripped. He had resigned by then. The board was pursuing recoupment actions tied to compensation and misrepresentation exposure. He had sold the condo. Elise had filed for separation. He told me our parents were devastated. Then he said the line I had waited years to hear and found no joy in hearing. "I knew you'd stay quiet because you always protected the family more than I did." I didn't respond for several seconds. Finally I said, "No, Ryan, I protected the illusion longer than I should have." He cried after that, actual crying, not performance. I listened because I wanted to know whether remorse sounds different from collapse. It does. Remorse is less interested in being comforted. He said he had spent his whole adult life feeling like the room changed when I entered it, like my competence took oxygen from his ambition. "Then you should have built your own air," I said, "not learned to breathe through my lungs." My parents wanted family reconciliation immediately, of course. Disaster always makes enablers. Crave quick ceremony. My mother left crying voicemails about how none of this was worth losing each other. My father asked whether public victory had made me happy. I never answered that question directly because happiness had never been the point. The point was that I would not die watching someone else wear my life like a suit tailored for him. I met my parents once in April at a quiet restaurant in Madison and said what should have been obvious years earlier. "The reason this feels tragic to you now is because the humiliation is visible. The harm was visible to me the entire time." My father stared at his hands for most of that conversation. My mother cried halfway through and asked if I could at least acknowledge that they had been manipulated too. That was when I finally said something I had swallowed for a decade. Being easy to manipulate is not the same as being innocent when the manipulation benefits you. She didn't know what to do with that sentence, neither did he.